Welcome to Legends in Leadership, brought to you by ISF and the Carrington Group. Legends in Leadership is an inspirational podcast featuring the stories of leaders who are making a difference. Our goal is to inspire you with the stories of leaders who come from humble beginnings, overcome challenges, and ultimately rise up to make a difference in people's lives.
Welcome to Legends in Leadership. This is Jason Smith. I'm a family officer with the Carrington Group and your host for today's podcast. We have a full house today. I'm joined by Dr. Blair Ritchie, Executive Director of the International Student Foundation, and two of my partners at the Carrington Group, Tyler Tallman and Kyle Watkins. Welcome, guys.
Good to be here.
Yay.
Well, we're excited to have the CEO of Urban Air with us today. But first, as we do every week, we're going to start off with a little bit of leadership trivia. Dr. Blair, what do you have for us today?
All right. Today's legendary leader happened to be the first blind and deaf person to ever graduate from college. Now, remember, we at ISF, we are committed to helping aged out foster care youth achieve what only 3% of foster care kids ever achieve, and that's the earning of a college degree. So we get inspired by stories like this that overcome this. So anyhow, this leader was afflicted at the age of 19 months with an illness that left her blind, deaf, and mute. This person not only learned how to read Braille, but she learned to speak and to listen by pressing her hands on people's lips. She went on to become an author, a public speaker, and traveled the world giving hope to the disabled. One of my favorite quotes of hers is she once said that there is much suffering in the world, and yet there's also much overcoming of suffering. And she truly was an overcomer. So, interesting fact, she personally met every United States president in her lifetime.
Whoa.
Wow.
Can't say that about myself at all. Anyhow, I'll be back who is this legendary leader? I'll be back at the end of the show with the answer to...
Right. Can you tell, was there a movie made about this person?
Some miracles, maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, we are excited to welcome Michael Browning Jr. to our podcast today. He began his professional career at Cirrus Health, developing and managing physician-owned ambulatory surgery centers and short-stay hospitals. In 2005, he founded Phoebus Partners, a healthcare consulting firm, which eventually sold to Montecito Medical Investment Corporation. In 2009, he helped launch Santa Barbara Medical Innovations, a privately held healthcare company specializing in the distribution of Zerona non-invasive body contouring laser. In 2011, Michael founded Urban Air Trampoline and Adventure Park, where he currently holds the title of CEO. Urban Air is the nation's premier full-service family entertainment company, offering safe, clean, affordable, active family entertainment. So welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
So on behalf of all parents, I want to thank you for wearing out our kids occasionally and getting them to bed at a reasonable hour.
And grandparents, by the way.
And grandparents,
yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing I like better than when I see a mom who's driving home in her minivan and she hashtags Urban Air and there's a picture of a bunch of kids passed out in the back. Right? Like, that's the goal of what we do.
Yeah. So I definitely want to dive into that aspect of what you're involved with today. But would first like to learn a little bit about you and your upbringing and background, and maybe just tell us about one or two early influences in your life that helped put you on a path to success.
Yeah, sure. So I think if you talk to my parents, they'd always tell you that I was entrepreneurial. So some funny things they always joke about is going door to door and selling bracelets, or
Nice.
I got into a business with my dad selling baseball cards and reading Beckett's and trying to figure out the best time to unload some of these business cards, these baseball cards. So it's always been innate. I think it's one of these things where you can be taught all kinds of things in school and you can sharpen and hone your skills, but there's something about the innate ability of an entrepreneur to have what I call opportunistic vision, and throughout my career, that's really what I think has been the key to my success, is seeing an opportunity, and you really have about 5 to 10 seconds in your mind and your being to say, I'm going to go after it, and then developing the plan to do so.
So how did you maybe hone that innate ability or skill set? Is there anything that you've done specifically to improve it or sharpen it?
Well, I think hard work is obviously important. I grew up watching my dad, and he worked really, really hard. So there's that. But, I always view life and every opportunity and every challenge is almost like a game, right? And how can I most efficiently and most effectively conquer the challenge? So I always tell my staff, it's not that we're going to get down that we have a problem or a challenge. Is, are we facing the same problem or challenge this time next year, right? Okay. So I just look at everything that we're doing as not to boil it down or sound meaningless like it's a game, but the part of success and disruption in our space is going to create challenges and problems to solve. So we just want to move through them every day. I tell the staff, like, it's all about laying track every day. And if we continue to lay track every day, by the time we get to the end of the year, we've laid a ton of track and we've gone somewhere. So we don't sit in these vacuums and say, hey, we're going to have this idea, we're going to cultivate this idea, and we're going to bring it to market in 12 months. We're going to bring a minimum viable product to market today. We're going to work off of a continuous feedback loop and continue to improve.
Yeah. So I'm curious, as you've grown multiple organizations, how are you able to maintain that mindset as the staff grows and maybe as the touch point directly to you gets 1 or 2 circles away?
Sure, yeah, it's definitely a challenge. So I always use the analogy of, like, when you start a business, you're in a speedboat and you're driving and everyone's really close around you and you're going places and you're going fast. But as your organization grows, and specifically at Urban Air where we are now, it's more like having a battleship. So we're covering a very similar amount of ground as we move, but it seems like we're moving a lot slower, and the people aren't as close to you. But so you have to start building those levels and layers of accountability and interaction and culture, so that you know that the guy who's at the very back of the battleship knows the vision and goals and is executing on their piece.
Yeah.
Michael, back up a little bit for me. You know, in entrepreneurship, there's you talked a little bit kind of this innate ability to kind of see visions, but you know, throughout your career, you know, you started off, it sounded like, in the medical space.
Yeah.
And, what were some of the forks in the road, or some of the big decision points for you, or aha moments that you go, this isn't what I want to do, or maybe this isn't my long-term vision for my life or for myself? So to talk a little bit about some things that happened along your journey, even previous to Urban Air.
Yeah, sure. So there's a common thread across everything I've ever done is, and that's the customer. So whether it's a patient or a customer and being a mom, or a doctor who's the customer, the common thread across all the businesses that I've been involved in has been understanding that. So when I started Phoebus Partners out of the dorm room at TCU, we ended up interacting with a guy named Roland Hansen. He was the chief marketing officer globally for Microsoft. And you know, he really helped me understand that you need to try to not be everything to everyone, because then you become so watered down that you can't relate.
Sure.
So the common thread across all those organizations is understanding the customer. And so whether it was medical devices, in the body contouring space, that was a certain type of demographic we were targeting, or in the Urban Air space, it's a very specific type of person that we're targeting. And understanding who that consumer is really important. I'll never forget, when I sold my business to Roland and the guys over at Montecito, we were sitting down and we were at this winery in Montecito, California, and this is where like Oprah lives and Ellen, all these movie stars. And you know, he's like, Michael, did I ever tell you my story at Microsoft? I'm like, no, and tell me, right? And he goes, well, did I ever tell you how I named Microsoft Windows? And I said, no, because if you Google Roland Hansen, he's given credit for naming Microsoft Windows. And I said, obviously, tell me this amazing story. So I'm sitting there. He goes, well, Bill Gates walks into my office and he has a crash cart. And on this crash cart, he has a desktop, right? And he rolls it and he says, Roland, I want to show you our new operating system. We got to figure out what to call it. And so Bill Gates sits down, Roland sits down, and Bill Gates starts clicking on the mouse. And Roland goes, Bill, like, what in the hell are all these windows that keep popping up? And Microsoft Windows was born.
Wow.
Right? And so his claim to fame is just call it what it is, like make it simple for the consumer to understand.
Yeah.
Right? Very few companies like Google and Facebook have the brand awareness and the ability to create these amazing brands. Otherwise, you got to spend a ton of marketing dollars to do so. So just keep it simple.
Right. So it's obvious. rather than having to spend the billions to convince people of what it is. Just make it obvious.
Sure.
Kyle, did you hear that? He's a horned frog.
I did hear that. So I did pick up on that.
You're now outnumbered 3-1 in the room. So I like that a lot. So I'm curious. Then looking back now, I mean, you're obviously a young, successful entrepreneur that's you've made your way quickly. Looking back now at that, graduate coming right out of college at 22 years old, what would you tell yourself now that would have probably done differently, or you learned the most?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think being emotionally mature in some high stress business situations, I think being able to, if I could have coached myself to take the emotion out of the situation and not take it so personal when you're doing M&A transactions or working with a big client, and everybody wants to win, and when it's your baby, it's very emotional. So I think at a young age, and probably I'm still dealing with those some of those things today, but I would have done better, and I would have coached myself through that. I think my dad always taught me, like, cash is king, right? So always focusing on cash flow. I grew up just having a budget when I was a kid and understanding cash flow. So I've always created businesses that generate tremendous cash flow, and never had to get debt and those types of things. But I would say I would also learn more about leverage early on at an age, and how to scale using leverage, and not necessarily being so content on using the cash that I have to grow the business.
Using that leverage as a tool for growth rather than being a burden.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for entrepreneurs, it's like you don't go ask for the money when you need it. You get the money in place way before you need it, and that's the key. Good stuff.
I'm curious, what attracted you to the medical field for your first big venture?
Sure. So I started at Cirrus Health, and I was an analyst and working on helping figure out where to place ambulatory surgical centers and short-stay hospitals for doctors who would invest, and then they would own it and bring in their cases. But we had to understand the outlying market demographic to make sure that we were putting a hospital in a place that actually had a patient base that would need the services.
Right.
So it was kind of like a blessing in that I got put into that job and learned a lot about customer analytics, and had a great mentor there, and a guy named Lee Roberts. And so I didn't necessarily choose to go into that space.
Gotcha.
I can't take credit for that vision. It just happened, and I just worked hard, and I don't know, I really, really like the data behind it, right? I tell all my employees now, like, in God we trust, and everyone else brings data, right? Because the data doesn't lie.
Trust but verify kind of approach.
Yeah,
yeah.
Absolutely.
So in your medical experience, there's just a lot of, it seems, bureaucracy in medicine now, and a lot of just grinding the gears just to get care. Did you face any of those challenges in your space?
Sure, a little bit. So in the short stay hospital and ambulatory surgical space, there was a lot of billing that we dealt with, CMS and Medicare, Medicaid, and your big healthcare players, and so it was always trying to figure out how to bring the cases in and code them correctly so that you could get paid, and then chasing the money from the payment or from the cases, making sure that your AR doesn't get too big, and it's crazy. And then when I got out of the hospital space and moved into the body contouring space, that's all cash pay.
Yeah, right.
So that was a lot easier. But then demographics became a lot more important, right? Because it was a very discretionary spend, instead of a needs-based spend. So we actually had to go to markets and find a demographic, a customer base that would have a desire for the service and the ability to afford it.
Right. That makes sense.
So trace the dots for me. How does that lead to trampolines?
Yeah, I know, right? I get that all the time. So I was actually at a conference in San Francisco called Technology and Plastic Surgery, and I was speaking about our product along with how to place it in markets. And I had some downtime, and my chief medical officer and myself, Ryan Maloney, we went over near the Golden Gate Bridge. There's a park called Chrissy Park, and it's amazing. These old airplane hangars, and they've turned them into businesses. And there are these guys that took an old airplane hangar and turned it into a trampoline park. Nice. And they took these airplane hangar doors, and it could open up to the bay, and it was beautiful. And I saw it, and I said, that's a really interesting concept, but they were operating it more like a skate park.
Right.
And so when I started studying it, I even talked to them. I was like, do you guys want to expand this? I think I could help you. I know how to scale. I have this demographic platform. And they're like, no, we're kind of one and done. This is fun for us. And so when I started studying it, I was like, what can I do to decrease volatility in the revenue stream, or what I thought was the revenue stream? I didn't want to have to compete with neighborhood soccer on Saturday or the Cowboys playing on Sunday. So I was like, birthday parties, right? Like, what's the one thing every kid has every year I can bet on it, right? And it was parties. So I went back to Dallas and I told my dad, I said, hey, I want to take you to San Francisco. I want to see if you can build this for me, because at the time he was a custom home builder, high-end homes in Colleyville, South Lake Grapevine. And once I flew him out there, he's like, yeah, if you do the business model and you do your thing and I'll do my thing and let's have a go at it. And so it was the light bulb just saying, I think there's something here. And that was really it.
Now, I'm always intrigued whenever you kind of get a tiger by the tail, which sounds like what you've got now. How do you navigate personally the success you've been experiencing? So just maybe chat a little bit about some of those challenges that you're facing.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. You have to stay grounded, right? So and you have to surround yourself with people who will keep you grounded and humble, because you can get too high on your horse. And my wife's always good at bringing me down off my high horse. Like, I don't care what you accomplish today. Like, you're still the guy I met in high school, right? Yeah, like, take out the trash, do your chores. So she's amazing. Obviously surrounded by great family, involved in a local church, but also involved in organizations. So, what you guys are doing with the foster kids is big to our heart, because we do the same thing with a company over on the mid-city side of town called The Chosen Ones. And they're a foster organization, and so we're involved in that because many times these foster families don't have the funds to be able to afford a birthday party for the foster kids. Right. Oh, yeah. So at Urban Air, anywhere in Dallas-Fort Worth, the last Sunday of every month, if you're a foster family, we will give you a free birthday party for your foster kid. And so being involved in organizations with people who haven't had the opportunity or the luck, who haven't been given the privilege that I had when I grew up, really lets you know like what's important. And I think I was taught early. I had the opportunity to go spend some time with the Truett family who founded Chick-fil-A. Mm-hmm. And when I was sitting down with them, and they're like, look, man, like, you're doing well, but what you got to realize, at some point in your life, you get to a point where the money is the scoreboard, right? It's like the zeros in the bank account and the commas. It's the scoreboard that the business world tells you you're doing a good job, but you have to find meaning and you have to find purpose outside of the commas and the zeros in your bank account, because it will not fulfill you or sustain you long term. And so that's where I think the involvement in family and outside organizations and the church are really important to us.
We see people that get stuck in that more for the sake of more. Yeah. And it's like, at what point does it translate into meaning or purpose or true value?
And don't get me wrong, like, I like a nice car.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But so I'm not that guy that, lives in a box and just stashes it all away. Like, we have a very nice lifestyle, but there's things that are way more important.
There's balance to be brought.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we talk about, what does it look like for an entrepreneur to take his business success and really convert it into personal significance, because it's easy to never really see what you did from a personal level in your life. I saw you guys did over 80 birthday parties. Was that last year? Or?
Yeah, we did. So it was interesting, right? So like I've learned a lot about the foster world and what's going on. You have to be very protective of their identities, right? And all these things, and which is wonderful. And we originally went to CASA, and we were a nobody in the national scale. So CASA didn't really have an interest in working with us, but we found a little organization that was more local to Dallas and where we're from, and I started working with them. So if anyone's listening from CASA, I've got 267 locations across the country that we want to roll this out nationwide.
They'll be in touch.
We believe no kid should ever go without having an amazing birthday party and feeling special, right? Mm-hmm. And we can help make that happen.
Nice. That's awesome.
That is awesome. And I know at ISF we do some work with CASA and have partnered with them to do some different things. So a nice synergy point there, and love the concept.
Well, most entrepreneurs are lifelong learners, sharpening the saw. And I'm curious, how do you continue to learn? Are you a book guy? Or
sure.
So tell us a little bit about how you keep your sharp edge.
So I don't watch TV. Well, let me take that back. There's two shows I watch. One is my release, which is Game of Thrones. Yeah. And other is my my kind of like pump-up show, which is Billions.
Okay.
So
great one.
Those are the only ones I watch, and then otherwise I'm on Audible all the time, downloading books, or I'm reading the news. I also have a lot of great mentors, but two that I work with really closely now. So Ken May, he was the CEO of Topgolf.
Oh, yeah.
And now he's the CEO of Drive Shack.
Okay.
He's a mentor to me, and he's on my board. And then Chris Tanko, who's the Chief Operating Officer for 7-Eleven, is one of my mentors. So I'm always trying to be around people. I always say I want to be around people who are further than me. Like I've seen the movie and have the T-shirt, right? And can help me, because you get to a certain point with guys like Ken May and Chris Tanko, it's a widget. Like Urban Air is a widget to them, and they've seen this story before. And so I try to read case studies and talk to them. I have lunch with Chris tomorrow and at the 7-Eleven headquarters, and just trying to learn. Yeah. And then I hired an amazing team, a senior leadership team of people who are way smarter than me. I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room. Yeah. And I love that. Yep. And so that's how I do it.
From the content side, whether it's Audible or a book that you've read, is there one that sticks out that provided a key lesson that maybe our audience could take away from your experience?
Yeah, there's a book written by the guy who founded Zappos. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. Amazing customer service book, right? So some things that stuck with me from that book were don't outsource your core competencies.
Okay.
So at Urban Air, after the theme park is built, we're a customer service and marketing company at our core. So we have an in-house guest loyalty team, which is our call center. We have an in-house marketing department. So our job is to drive customers into Urban Air and then provide them with an amazing experience, both either in the park, on the phone, or online. So we don't outsource our core competencies. And then there's another book called Blitzscaling. And it's really, I've always believed this in my soul, but I've never found a book that puts it in, if I was going to write a book, this would have been my book, but somebody beat me to it. So Blitzscaling is amazing. So it talks about how speed and innovation win, offense is the best defense.
Right.
And because on the Urban Air side, it's an arms race in the sense of real estate. Right. So we have to be very opportunistic to jump on old Toys R Us boxes, Gander Mountains, H.H. Greg's, whatever it is. And so we have to be ready to jump at any time. So Blitzscaling and then the Zappos customer culture book are great for me.
You need to be in an area first, essentially. Yeah. Because there's not much, I suppose, around intellectual property or copyright or trademark that you can do for the concept as a whole, that would make it protected.
Yeah, I would say there's definitely some components that are easy to replicate, but we have spent a lot of money in research and development creating new attractions. We're actually launching one next week in South Lake that are patented.
Oh, great.
So we are working through that. We want to continue to create more barriers to entry, have more USPs, right, on that make it more difficult for someone to try to knock us off.
So trying to disrupt your own brand and your own business rather than letting a competitor do it.
Well, and it's being a multivariate offering, right? So we believe that our attractions, our lighting, our sound, and our people are the recipe to success. And when you have so many recipes or so many ingredients in your recipe, it's hard to bake the cake if you can't figure all of them out. So the competition has to focus on one of these things, and while they're focusing on this, we're improving these other ones. And so we just keep moving the ball down the field.
Right.
I have to digress just a little bit. So my wife and I were avid watchers of Billions as well, and you call that your pump-up show. So I have to ask you, what about Billions pumps you up?
Well, I think that I like Bobby Axelrod's style, right? And I always tell my wife, I need that psychologist in my office, right? So he right now in the new season, he's going through challenges with Taylor Mason, who has betrayed him. We've had some of those betrayal stories. I think as an entrepreneur, and me, I haven't always done it right from a contract perspective. So I've had people that I thought were really good partners and really good vendors, and I've done a lot for them, and then they used on the back of our success, they've kind of tried to stick it to us. So right now I can really relate with what he's going through with Taylor Mason and how he's trying to suck the oxygen out of the room. So, it's kind of fun to watch for me. Yeah. I love his style.
Good stuff.
That's a whole other show right there, isn't it?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Well, we really do appreciate you making time to visit with us, share your story, and share a few nuggets with us today.
Well, I appreciate the time, and it was an honor to get a chance to work with you guys.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Blair, we're going to throw it back to you now for the answer to our trivia question.
All right. I have an answer, but I have a shameless plug first. Legends in Leadership is this wonderful podcast we've launched, and we have a really fun event coming up, our first ever luncheon, Leadership and Legend Luncheon. that we're hosting at the clubs of Prestonwood. So everybody in the North Dallas area or at DFW community, we're inviting out to May 1st, Wednesday, May 1st luncheon. Special guest Michael Franzese, who has an amazingly inspiring story of being part of the mob and the mafia and walking away from that. And I don't know about you guys, but I think one of the challenges of leadership is staying inspired, so that you really keep that inspiration up. And that's kind of the vision behind the luncheon, is just bring a bunch of leaders in a room, let's tell some stories and inspire them, and make their midweek an incredible week. So just want to say an invitation out to everyone listening. If you're in the DFW area on Wednesday, May 1st, ISF Carrington Group are sponsoring the Leadership Luncheon. You can go onto our ISF website, isfsite.org, and the event page has some ticket opportunities, and invite everybody out. It's going to be a great lunch.
Yes.
Today's trivia.
Yes.
Who is it?
Helen Keller.
Helen Keller's right. There you go. There you go.
A first grade report on that right now.
Did you?
Yeah, so
very nice.
timely.
Very nice. Very nice.
Well, I want to thank you all for tuning into our show today, and again, thanking our guests for sharing some time with us. And I hope everyone will check out the luncheon, Leadership Luncheon. It's our first one of, we hope, will be an annual event. So I want to remind you folks that if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are a leader.
Legends in Leadership is brought to you by the Carrington Group. Carrington Group is a family office with a passion for helping business leaders and their families make smart choices and fulfill their highest aspirations. To learn more about the Carrington Group, visit their website at www.carringtonfo.com or Google Carrington Group Dallas, Texas. ISF is committed to leadership development for aged-out foster care and orphaned youth. ISF's mission is to transform these youth into tomorrow's leaders with scholarships, mentoring, and leadership training. To learn more about ISF, visit their website at isfsite.org or Google International Student Foundation to learn more.
Securities offered through Regulus Advisors, LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Regal Investment Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Regulus Advisors and Regal Investment Advisors are affiliated entities. Carrington Group and this broadcast are independent of Regulus Advisors and Regal Investment Advisors.